Hello and welcome to today's webinar on applying for dual citizenship by descent. My name is Ginevra Morse, Director of Education and Online Programs here at New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be moderating today's event. NEHGS is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer this webinar today for our members and friends around the world. Giving today's presentation is Rhonda McClure, Senior Genealogist at NEHGS. Rhonda is a nationally recognized professional family historian and lecturer specializing in New England and celebrity research as well as computer genealogy. She's been at the Society for 10 years and helps patrons and members at our research library and archives here in Boston. Her areas of expertise include immigration and naturalization, late 19th and early 20th century urban research, New England, Midwest, Southern, German, Italian, Scottish, Irish, French Canadian, and New Brunswick research. So in the next 45 minutes or so, Rhonda will discuss applying for dual citizenship. She'll start by going over some dual citizenship basics, what it is, why might you consider applying for dual citizenship, and which countries offer it. We'll then look more specifically at Italy and Ireland, their qualifications, and the process for applying. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to write a question in the panel to the right of your screen. Rhonda will answer as many as she can in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the hour. We will select questions that are more general in nature, so please consider that when submitting your query. There is no handout for this lecture, but this event is being recorded and you can easily go back and review the video. So don't worry if you missed something on today's first listen. You can always go back and watch, rewatch, pause, fast forward, rewind the presentation. The URL for where we'll be posting that recording is there on the screen, and I'll also send that link to you in my follow-up email after today's presentation. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Rhonda.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Dual citizenship has become quite the buzzword in the last few years, and I know that here at the Society we help a number of individuals, primarily with their Italian or Irish connection, and I know that our Research Services Department is often working hard on compiling the packets necessary. So today is just going to be an overview. I do want to stress that the things that I'll be sharing with you are experiences that we have had with the various consulates and the records that were required. Of course, you know, when it comes right down to it, the consulate makes the ultimate decision. So while we're giving you some suggestions, if you do have some really in-depth questions, you may need to turn to the appropriate consulate to get your answers. So let's get started by talking about what is dual citizenship. Dual citizenship allows a person to legally hold passports for more than one country. You know, we all have seen the spy thrillers where he's got all sorts of passports that he hides and he goes incognito. These would both be in your name, and they allow you to be to enter countries under either passport. The person who has these passports is not required to give up their citizenship to whatever native country you know, they call home. So in other words, you know, if you're here in the US of A and you're a US citizen, you would not be required to give up that citizenship while holding a passport for one of these other countries that allows for dual citizenship. Acquiring citizenship in such countries does require the person to have a lineal descent from a native-born individual in that country. How far back that can go, how many generations to that person back in the old country varies depending on the country. And we'll look at some of those. But remember, I want to stress again that while we're giving you some suggestions and showing you some of the process, we are not lawyers, we're not anywhere involved in the legal issues of this. We just know kind of the process and we're sharing it with you. So why get dual citizenship? through the dual citizenship, especially if it's Irish or Italian, you're basically joining the European Union, which means that you can work and travel throughout those countries, regardless of where you actually enter. You know, if you enter in Ireland, if you enter in Italy, you can travel throughout any of the European Union countries without having any issues. Some companies also that do business in the EU sometimes give preference to hiring American applicants who hold dual citizenship. It's just easier for them to send them over to do work for an extended period of time without having any legal issues with the country in Europe. For some people, it's an additional connection to their family roots, especially if they want to travel back there frequently. They may want to just go back and have that connection and know that they're really solidly tied to the country. I do want to stress, if you get dual citizenship and you go into a country under that passport, in other words, under an Irish passport or under an Italian passport, and something happens, you get arrested, not that you all are bad folks, but you know, things happen. If that happens, you cannot turn to the United States Embassy for help, because as far as they're concerned, at that moment, because of the way you entered the country, you are not a U.S. citizen. So that's something to be aware of if you choose to get dual citizenship and travel under that other passport. All right, so who offers dual citizenship? You know, a lot of countries do it differently. Not every country offers it. Some call it dual citizenship, but it may not necessarily be what we're talking about here with the having the ability to have two passports. The best way to determine if a country offers this opportunity is to check with their consulate website. Most of them will have something having to do with citizenship. They will usually have frequently asked questions, etc., and we'll look at that in a moment. But you can also always Google the name of the country and then tack on dual citizenship to see what pops up. So first off, let's just take a look at a consulate site. This one happens to be the Republic of Croatia, which may seem like an odd one to just pull out, but I actually did have somebody last week who was curious to see if they could get dual citizenship through Croatia because of a relative of theirs. The website is at the bottom there, us.mvep.hr/en/. So that ensures that you will get an English version of their website. And among other things, you will find that under their diplomatic directory, or the consular information, you will see that there are a number of options. One of them is citizenship. You can see that second from the top here. And then just shortly below that is a Croatian passport. So there's a couple of different ones here that you can find as far as immediate places that you might check to see what you can do. By selecting the citizenship, what we will get is a page that describes the various ways to acquire Croatian citizenship. And you will notice that you can get it on grounds of origin, your parents, being born in the Republic of Croatia, through naturalization, and through certain international treaties. So what you see here below is persons who have acquired Croatian citizenship on grounds of origin or being born in the Republic of Croatia are registered into the Register of Citizens. So there's quite a bit more that continues on, but you may find that what you're actually seeking may not actually show up there. And so I always encourage you to look for things such as a contact, as we see up top, which is every site has a contact either at the top or down at the bottom, and then also check frequently asked questions as well, because both of those usually will have what you're looking for. If the frequently asked questions doesn't, then definitely reach out to the consulate. And quite frankly, that's the best tip of all. If you can't quite tell based on information that you're finding, or if you're getting conflicting information from other websites or people you've talked to, reach out to the consulate and ask them. They'll be the final decision maker anyway, so you might as well go with them before you do a whole lot of work, only to find out that you did it for nothing. There are other websites that can help you with some of the qualifications, etc. And so, as I mentioned, just Googling the country and dual citizenship will show a number of items. We see here up top that it says Croatia dual citizenship, which is the Google search term that I used, nothing fancy. And then usually something will pop up at the top that is maybe sponsored or maybe the best hit. And now they also include on Google other questions that may have been asked that are similar to what we've searched on. But if you continue to scroll down, and I always encourage people to scroll down in Google and to go more than one page, because your answer may not have made it onto the front page, maybe 2 or 3 pages down below. There are a number of other items here, dualcitizenship.com, Croatian citizenship, Croatian nationality law on Wikipedia, etc. And if we select the top one here, this dual citizenship one, what we get is another, it takes us to another website, and that particular website is showing us that they do allow some form of dual citizenship. And then it tells you kind of the overviews of the type of citizenship. Now, I have to say that citizenship by naturalization is not what we would consider a dual citizenship, because if you are naturalizing with any country, you are basically taking an oath of allegiance to that country. When you do that, you are in essence giving up your oath or abdicating your oath or fidelity to your other country. So naturalization is not what we would consider to be a dual citizenship type of option. There's another wonderful website that has for a lot of different countries. It's called multiplecitizenship.com. It's actually created from an Australian point of view, but they have a lot of links and they have a lot of countries that you can look at. And as you can see, the top, when they're talking about multiple citizenship, an Australian study, and then there's a Swiss nationalists, etc. But what they do is have towards the bottom, there is a link to the different countries, so you can check a particular country through this website and see what it says. Again, it's non-commercial, it's designed to give information, but you may ultimately need to reach out to a consulate somewhere to get the final answer as to whether or not you qualify. Which brings us to the big question. Do you qualify for dual citizenship? And since we're talking about this dual citizenship via descent, many countries do allow it through a parent. And so if your mother or your father was born in a particular country, you may be able to get dual citizenship through that. Some may require that your parent not have naturalized. Others may not make that a requirement. The Republic of Ireland specifically says that if your grandparent was born in Ireland, or your parent was an Irish citizen before your birth, then you can seek Irish citizenship. So if you have grandparents who were born in Ireland and then they came over here and they had, your mother and then you can qualify. If for whatever reason your parent, so in other words, your parent's grandparent was born in Ireland and your parent has qualified and done the Irish citizenship before you were born, then you could again qualify yourself. When it comes to Italy, there's quite a few possibilities for qualifying, and they have a much larger number of generations back that you may be able to qualify through. For Italy, a lot of it has to do with when the immigrant ancestor naturalized as to whether or not you qualify. And then there's a couple of other things that we'll talk about when we're going into this in depth. each country does have somewhere, if they offer the process, they will give you steps, they will give you some insight into what you have to go through. So if we look at the Irish website, they're a little different than just automatically going for a passport. Ireland requires that you first get registered in the foreign birth register. So your first step and all of the documents that you'll have to supply to them is not to get your passport, it's to get you onto the foreign birth register. And so as you can see, the top item is your eligibility, and it says that you know, any person with a grandparent born in any part of Ireland, or by any person whose parent received their Irish citizenship prior to the birth of the applicant. And then step 2, it talks about the grandparents, etc., and it eventually tells you what you'll have to do. So again, Ireland is a little different. Most of the other places, you're not actually getting put onto a register of sorts. You're just going and getting your passport. In this instance, you have to first be on that foreign birth register, which basically makes you Irish. And as we scroll down, there are, like I said, a number of different ways in which you could qualify for that Irish citizenship. And there's this lovely little table that they have published from Ireland that basically says, you know, if you were born on the island of Ireland on or before 31 December 2004, you're entitled to Irish citizenship, or you already are an Irish citizen. B is if you were born on the island on or after January 1st, 2005, and then has certain things. So if one or both of your parents were Irish or were British or entitled to live in Northern Ireland or the Irish state without restriction, if a foreign nationally, legally resident, etc., and or has been granted refugee status, then you get to be, you could get get on the register. The big one that we pay most attention to is item C and D, and that is child of A, so child of a parent who was born there, then you're automatically an Irish citizen. And if you are the grandchild of you know, somebody C, or a child of C or a grandchild of A who was born outside of Ireland, then you can register onto the foreign births register, and then you would be able to seek your Irish citizenship and get a passport. And then, of course, option E is the child of D, and in this instance, your parent, so your parent would be D, would need to have already been put onto the register of foreign births before you were born in order for that to happen. So there's a number of different options for Irish citizenship. One of the things that they don't seem too worried about is naturalization, which is kind of nice. There's a great website as well for checking to see if you can qualify for Italian an Italian passport, and it's myitalianfamily.com. If you just go there, you can immediately get to the various sections, one of them being the, as you can see at the very top, the apply for Italian citizenship. And then they have this wonderful tool where you can check and say, okay, I want to go through this way, you know, through my mother, through my father, or my grandmother, whatever. And then based on what you select from the relationships, it will give you certain criteria that may or may not determine whether or not you would qualify. And so we sort of broke that down into sort of a little chart here. And so if you're seeking the Italian dual citizenship, you're going through one of these people here, your mother, your father, either grandmother, or either one of the grandfathers. If you're going through your mom, then you have to ask the question, were you born after the 1st of January, 1948? If you weren't, then you will not qualify through mom. If you were, then you would go on to the next step. If you're trying to go through either your maternal or paternal grandmother, then the question is, was your mother or your father born after the 1st of January 1948? If not, then again, that's the end of the road for you. If yes, then you move on to the next step. Now, interestingly enough, you'll notice that for dad or either grandfather, you skip this whole January 1st, 1948 step. And we'll get into that rule when we look at going through the whole process. But basically, it is obviously they favored the male lineage a little better, and it has to do with laws and the opportunities for women under the laws of Italy. The big thing if you're going through dad or, so if you've qualified under the first two or you're going through dad or the grandfather, your next question is going to be, was the child of the immigrant born before the immigrant naturalized? If not, if the answer to that question is no, then again, you will not qualify. If the answer is yes, then the last hurdle to possibly qualifying is if it was somebody, if you've got large gaps in between your generations. Most of us have 20 to 25 years, but some have 30, 35. It's possible that your Italian immigrant came in and naturalized before 1 July 1912. If that happens, then unfortunately, you will not qualify. If that didn't happen, then congratulations, you qualify, and now you have to go through all the steps of applying and gathering your documents. So we're going to walk through these steps and kind of show you what's involved in going for either Italian or Irish citizenship. And I'm using these two because they seem to be the most popular that we deal with here at the Society. The 1948 rule is a completely Italian thing, but it is very, very important. So, as I mentioned, if you're going through your mother or your grandmother, either grandmother, this 1 January 1948 is a very important rule. And again, it has to do with the legalities of the women's rights and what they were, basically entitled to this 1948. So if you're trying to go through your mom, then you yourself have to be born after the 1st of January 1948. If you're going through either your mom's, your maternal grandmother or your maternal grandfather, then your mom has to be born after the 1st of January 1948. And if you're going through your paternal grandmother, then your dad has to be born after the 1st of January 1948. So anytime a grandmother, a mother or a grandmother's involved, this 1948 rule is something you have to establish and ensure that you're within compliance of that, because there's just no way around it. Our next step is the fact that we are going to have to consider naturalization dates. With the Italians, they consider naturalization to be a very important aspect of whether or not you can qualify for dual citizenship. The child of the immigrant, the one from whom you're descending, must have been born before the immigrant's naturalization was complete. Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't have started the process. He just couldn't have taken his oath of allegiance before your father, grandfather, whatever, was born. There is one odd twist in that if there was an immigrant who was naturalized before the 1st of July 1912, then no descendants of that person can qualify for dual citizenship. And this has to do with a law that was in effect at the time, which basically indicated that when your male great-grandfather naturalized here in this country, if he did it before this particular date, he was not only denouncing his own Italian citizenship, but he was denouncing it for all his descendants as well. So how do we figure out when somebody naturalized and whether or not we should pursue this? Well, our very first step is usually the census records, because we'll look to see if somebody's naturalized, when they're naturalized, when children are born, etc. The 1920 census not only asks when you immigrated, but also when if you were naturalized, and if so, when. Now, in the 1920 census here, we see Paul Verdelli in this top image, and he's the son of Peter. He's 28 years old, and he's a single male. He came with his dad and his mom and his siblings in 1903. But while his dad is an alien, he himself has naturalized by 1920. Now, he's a single man. So at this point, he has not had any offspring, and he's already a naturalized person. So as we look into the 1930 census, we find out that Paul's finally gotten married. He's actually married in like 1921-ish, give or take, to Anna, and he now has these children here, Carolina, Madalena, Pauline, and Robert. If you were a descendant of any of these children, you would not qualify for dual citizenship, because he naturalized before any of them were born. So that's a critical item there. It's unusual for people who are coming in and asking us to help them that the 1912 rule applies, but we see it here with Charles Otte and his wife Eliza. They were naturalized in 1904. So even though they have children, their oldest 4 children, Josephine, Araldo, Delpha, and Raymond, are all Alda, Josephine, Aralda, and Delpha, rather, are all older than 1904. In other words, they were all born before 1904. Because of that 1912 law, they unfortunately cannot apply for dual citizenship, anyone who descends from them, because he did not just denounce his own Italian citizenship, but he, in essence, denounced it for everybody. If you discover that your citizenship, your naturalization record dates work out, and that you do qualify, then your next step is going to be the act of gathering the required U.S. documents. And there's quite a few of them that are necessary, whether you're going for Irish or Italian citizenship, but they will vary depending on the country to which you are applying, and some countries may allow you to maybe substitute with, if you can't find a civil birth record, perhaps you can prove that they were, born or baptized or something through a church record. In the case of the Irish dual citizenship, like I said, it's a 2-step process. First, you have to get onto the register of foreign births register. So you have to get yourself put into that. Once you've done that, then you can apply for the Irish passport. For the Italians, the big thing with them is there's a lot of documents you have to acquire, and all of them have to include Italian translations. So it's not a process that you are going to do in a day. As we look at the Irish documents that you have to submit, if you're going through the grandparent who was born in Ireland, you will see that you have to have your long form civil birth certificate, marriage certificate if appropriate, plus photocopies. You're going to have a certified or notarized copy of the photograph of your current passport, as well as a state-issued ID, usually a driver's license. If you're over 18 years old, you're also going to have to supply them with 2 separate documents showing proof of residency, such as a phone bill, utility bill, etc. If you're under 18, then you have to have a school report or a doctor's letter stating that you are indeed a resident of the, where the proofs of residence, but it's a little different because obviously if you're under 18, you are not necessarily going to have bills in your own name. You're also going to need to have your parents' documents, whether, for your mother or for your father, whoever you're going through. And if they're still alive, you're going to have the certified or notarized copies of their passport and state-issued ID. If they're deceased, then their death record. And then, of course, you're going to have to supply the any records for the grandparent who was born in Ireland. So the long form birth certificate from Ireland, and then a marriage certificate, and either their passport and state ID if they're still alive, or their death certificate. Now, one of the things that they state expressly for both birth and marriages throughout this whole process is that you cannot substitute church records for any of the birth or marriages. So if you cannot find a civil state record of birth or marriage, then you're not really going to be able to apply, because you're not going to be able to supply what they require in your documents. If we flip over for the Italians for a minute, as I mentioned, that first step on the myitalianfamily.com site is to select the relationship from you to your Italian ancestor, in other words, the person who comes in. So for the purposes of this example, I chose the mother and grandmother. And you will see that because of that, in big red letters, it comes up with that 1948 rule that we talked about. Your mother was born after January 1st, 1948 in your native country, and your maternal grandmother was an Italian citizen at the time of your mother's birth. Now that's a little tricky, because if your mother has to be born after 1948, then your grandmother cannot have naturalized before that. So not many people can get in through the mother and grandmother in this particular case. But if you have determined that you do apply through that situation, you would then come down to step 3, and you would click on the I qualify. What are the required documents to apply? And a new screen will pop up showing a number of documents. And the good news about this is what I like to do whenever I'm helping somebody, as after I've determined that they qualify and can get the list of documents, is to go through that and almost treat it like a checklist. So we'll see that it starts out mother, grandmother at the very, very top of the list of documents, and then we'll have it actually goes backwards. So in other words, the first document that it talks about is your maternal grandmother's birth certificate from Italy. And then it's going to come forward to yourself with each of the documents that are required. So you need your maternal grandmother's birth certificate. You actually need your maternal grandfather's birth certificate, your maternal grandparent's marriage certificate, your maternal grandmother's certificate of naturalization, or her Italian passport or green card, depending on if she never naturalized, your mother's birth certificate, your father's birth certificate, your parents' marriage certificate, your birth certificate, your marriage certificate if you're married. And as we continue on, even more documents are required. Beyond that, you'll need your spouse's birth certificate if you're married. If you got divorced, you'll need your divorce decree. And then birth certificates for all of your children under the age of 18. And then obviously some of those people are probably not still alive, so you'll need death certificates. And then one of these applications, whichever the one that's the most appropriate for your type of application, you'll need to fill that out as well. The good news is that the particular form of these particular forms here for the application of Italian citizenship don't need to be notarized, so that's one less item in this. But you'll see for all of these that in addition to, like at the very top, your marriage certificate, and then it says with an apostille from the Secretary of State. And we'll talk about what that is in just a moment as I show you some of the documents and what they look like and what they need to have as far as seals, etc. It's actually, there's multiple steps you have to go through for each of these items. And then the final item that you'll need to do is a copy of your passport and driver's license, and then your maternal grandmother's certificate of Italian citizenship. This is one of those things where you're going to want to talk to your Italian consulate and see if it's really required. They don't all require it. I don't know that anybody who's done it here through that we've helped at all has ever had to have that in addition to everything else. Keep in mind that the U.S. certificates need to be what they call long form or full form. It has to have the full place of birth or marriage. You can't just have the county. Okay, so if you got, Pennsylvania is one that I know does short forms sometimes, and it just says they were born in the county of. If that's what you have, or that's what they're going to give you, tell them that you need the long form because you have to have the city of birth. And then if your maternal grandmother became a naturalized citizen before your mother's birth, as I mentioned, then you're not entitled. So you're going to have to look and see if you could apply with another particular category. The good news is that with the Italians, you often have a lot of different categories. So if you qualify, then there may be a number of documents that you may have to get. Now, in one of our situations where we were helping somebody, we discovered that they could not find a birth record for the immigrant back in Italy. I can't remember if there was record destruction or what the issue was. So in that instance, what they did is they accepted a certified passenger list that said, I am who I am. I was born in this area of Italy, and they could do that because this particular passenger list is done in 1912. So the arrival was in 1912, and by that time, one of the questions on the passenger list wasn't just I'm from Italy, but exactly where were you born? And so that was used as a substitute record. That may not be open to every situation, but in this particular situation, it was allowed. And you will notice that it's very fancy. It's got red ribbons, etc. This was a certified copy through the National Archives of this, stating that this was an original document, hadn't been amended, and it was accurate. One of the other items that you're going to have to supply for an Italian naturalization is, of course, the naturalization record for your ancestor. And again, this is one of those situations where as you're acquiring some of these records, the census may have said, yeah, he was naturalized afterwards, and then you may get the naturalization record and find out that unfortunately that wasn't the case. So we're going to look in depth at what you should expect to find in one of these naturalization records, and we're going to blow up the top half of this naturalization record for Giovanni Micali, and you'll see that it's the petition of Giovanni Micali. It gives his place of residence, his occupation, his date of birth, where he was born, when he emigrated, what ship he came on, and the port he came in through, the name of his wife, etc. And then it lists all the children that were born to this couple. And in this instance, we see Paolo, who was born August 12th, 1922. As we scroll down to the second half of this document, we find that he has been continually in this country since 1914, and that he declared his intent to become a citizen the 14th of August, 1926. Now, the three-step process of naturalization, the declaration, the petition, and then the final oath of allegiance, you could have done the first two steps. Provided he hasn't taken that oath of allegiance, he is still not considered to be a U.S. citizen. So that's the critical date. But you want to look at all the dates that you see on a record. And so in this case, this declaration was done in 26. The back side of this form has a number of areas. There's an oath of allegiance, there's an order of court admitting petitioner, there's an order of court denying the petition, and other items that may apply. What we see here is that if we blow up the top part, that when we have the order of court admitting the petitioner, so that says that he's taken the oath required by law, and that he did so and has become a citizen as of March 20th, 1928. So that's his, now from this point forward, he's a US citizen. So if he had another child who was born in 1929, any descendants of that child wouldn't qualify. So if we compare Paolo's birth to the final date of the order of admission, we can see that Paolo was born before the final oath and, you know, the court admitting him as a US citizen. So as far as the Italians are concerned, congratulations, any descendant of Paolo's can apply for citizenship and would most likely be able to get their passport. Now, as I mentioned, you have to get a number of certified records. And in some states, there may be records that have been turned over to the state archives, and they often look slightly different from if you went to the state vital statistics office. And so here you see a copy of a record of birth, and it abstracts all the information, in this case, the birth of Paolo, our gentleman who was born in 1922, gives his parents' names, it gives any supplemental record, it gives the date it was filed with, the original record was filed with the town, and then you'll notice down towards the bottom here by the signature, we see the year, volume, and page and certificate number from that original volume. And then because it's certified, we find that we get the seal of in this case, the state of Massachusetts. So an archived certified copy may look different from a state vital statistics document, which we will show you in the next slide, which is oftentimes done on special colored paper. And again, this is, in some instances, I feel like from a genealogical standpoint, much more accurate, because literally what they did is they put the original document onto a photocopier and they copied it onto their special paper. And then they put their seal on at the bottom and their date and, you know, the registrar's signature, etc. And so this is a certified record from the State Registry of Vital Statistics for Massachusetts. Now, not all of your records are going to look the same. While they may have special paper, etc., such as the certified record from New York that I'm about to show you, which again is literally a photocopy put onto special paper. The colored paper that you're seeing here, if it is photocopied to make, in other words, to try and cheat and make another copy of a record that somebody might steal an identity with, it actually pops up with these void that go across the record. So that's one of the reasons why they use this special paper. So with the next slide, we have the New York one. And again, we see that we have the seal, we have everything that's here, we have, you know, whatever they're doing with their special paper. But if you notice up at the top, you can see that I have sort of it's attached to something else. And they actually put a number of things on this. They had a pink piece of paper that said it was being certified, but then the most important thing was the apostille. So remember that I was saying that not only does it have to be certified, but it also has to have an apostille. So let's talk about what an apostille is, because not many people are familiar with that term. First off, it comes out of the Hague apostille, but we've shortened it down to just the apostille. And it is sometimes referred to as an endorsement, but it verifies the authenticity of a record for international use. It's taken from the French term apostille, which means to certify or to authenticate. And what it allows is for records that would normally require the consulate or somebody in that government to stop and do all of this certification of records from country to country. Instead, the apostille is recognized by any other country. So when you get your certified records from New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, wherever, after you have your certified copies, then you have to take it and get them apostilled from the state where that event took place. And basically, it's just one higher level of authenticity of the record and is intended for any record that's going to be used for international use, which is basically what you're doing. These records are going to the consulate and they are going to be turned over. And think about it, consulates are basically, you're going into Italy. If you go into the Italian consulate, you're going into Italy. And so that's why they require the apostille. And you'll see that for this one here from Massachusetts, it actually talks about the Hague Convention in October of '61, which is where they agreed that yes, all the countries would accept a record that had this. Now, the thing about the apostille is that it'll usually have some information that verifies that whoever signed the certified copy of your document is recognized by that state, and then can be further verified. And they always will put something fancy, and you'll notice that it has, in addition to its additional seal, there's often a ribbon or something that connects it, attaches it to the document in question, so that it can't be separated from that document without it being obvious. For Massachusetts, we do it with the lovely little seal and the ribbon. In the example from New York, they were actually done where they just attached it with this sort of eye connector, and all of the records underneath apply to this particular document in question that was, certified on the 21st of September 2017. And one of the things about whoever does the apostille, they have copies of all the notaries for that state, all of the people who have authorization to do any kind of certifying or notarizing of any type of document. So once you have gotten all of those records, remember that we have to get some records from the old country. And whether it's Ireland, Canada, Italy, wherever, you're going to have to get something that shows your connection to the old country. And in the case of Ireland, you absolutely have to have a civil record. So you're going to have to request that through their public record office, either in Dublin or in Belfast, and it's going to come looking like this particular example that you see here. Again, they have photocopied it onto their special paper, and this will be one of the documents that you will include. When it comes to requesting your records from Italy, the most important thing is going to be the form in which you get back. So when you contact the comune, which is basically the town, in Italy for the record, you want to tell them that you are getting dual citizenship so that you can ensure that you get the correct record back. But you'll see here that it's very colorful. We have lots of stamps and stickers, and we're going to look at this. We're going to blow this up so that I can point out some critical pieces of information. The biggest thing is that when you write and request it from and it's the Office of the Stato Civile that you see up here just above the the names. So at the very top we have Melito Irpino, which is the town. It's in the province of Avellino, and it's coming from the Ufficio Stato Civile, basically the state civil office. They deal with birth, marriage, and death records. And what you need is the estratto per riassunto del registro degli atti di nascita, which is birth, matrimonio, which is marriage, and morte, which is death. So if you need a birth, marriage, and a death, you're going to have separate documents of each one of these. But it needs to be this estratto per riassunto, which is basically the equivalent to a long form, for lack of a better term. And so here we see that Serafina Maria Muto, who was born a female child who was born on the hour of 9:13 in Melito Irpino, and notice that they spell out their date. So you don't see a numbered date like we would normally expect. Il 7 novembre 1879. So she was born the 7th of November, 1879. And her parents are Carmine Muto and Maria Antonia Camuso. Then below that, we see a notation, the annotazione. In Italian records, there's a marginal, there's a margin to either the right or left of the document within the volume where it's recorded, and they will very often cross-reference if there was a marriage that took place. So that's something that we always have to, you got the long form if you get all of this information. And then at the bottom, you will get, as we scroll down, further down into the document, you will get, any official stamps, any signatures that are required. But this is what an original record from Italy should look like. So if we've got all of that, when it comes to the Italians, they require that you translate all the documents into Italian. The Irish require, if you don't have things that are in English or Irish, that they be translated to English or Irish. So you may have to translate some documents. And that for the Italian applications, all of those translations have to be notarized, and then they also have to have the apostille on them as well, so that it is certain that there was a correct translation of that. I strongly suggest you don't use your cousin down the street. Go to a recognized translator who has done this, because they obviously will have somebody who can notarize, and then the apostilles can be applied with when you go to do all your other records. So use a recognized translator. So what are our costs for all of this? There's a lot of fees. Obviously, you're going to have fees for getting certified copies of records. There's additional fees to get the apostille attached. Translation services. If you aren't going to actively get all of these records yourself and you're going to pay somebody for doing the work, that's going to be another cost. But as far as the applications themselves, the dual citizenship application requires a non-refundable €300 fee. And then for getting added to the Irish Foreign Birth Registry, that application requires a €278 fee, and those were as of 2014. Step 6 is to apply and wait. And if you are dealing with the Italians, it is Italian time, so there will be a lot of waiting and a lot of patience that you will need to have. But once you get your appointment and you get approved, then congratulations. You will then get to get your passport, and then you can go into Italy as an Italian citizen, or go to Ireland as an EU citizen, and who knows what you'll be able to do once you have gone through all of this. So just keep that in mind, that there's a lot that goes into this.
All right, so with that, let's take some questions. And I know that there are a lot of questions, a lot of very specific questions about different countries. We don't have time today to answer all of them, but I do just at the outset want to say that as Rhonda mentioned, we do consultations, and this is, people come to us either for consultations or for research services to really help them with this process. I think, as you've probably seen throughout the presentation, it can be a complicated process. Not only figuring out whether or not you qualify, but also the process for gathering all the documents and going through the application process. So if you are interested in either consultation or hiring our research services team, you can find those emails on the screen in front of you, and I'll also include them in my follow-up email to you. So a few general questions here. So about siblings, Kathy wants to know, can two American siblings apply together so that they only have to supply kind of one set of records? So I'll ask that one first, and then I have a follow-up question.
No, generally speaking, the consulates all require that each person who's going to get a passport or get onto a registry, a foreign birth registry or something like that, each person has to bring in their own packet of documents.
And my follow-up question is, if your sibling or maybe cousin has already done the process, is there any kind of shortcut that you can take to speed up the process?
The only shortcut is the fact that you probably already know where all the records are and that you qualify so that you'll be able to get them quicker. But as far as, you're still going to have to go through the process. You're going to have to get your appointment date at the consulate, etc. There is no shortcut.
And a number of questions about discrepancies in records. So surnames changing spellings, maybe something becoming more American sounding. Does that present issues? Do you have to create kind of a genealogical proof? Is there something, does that cause problems, and is there a way around it?
So if it's a minor variation, Mary to Maria, vice versa, something like that, then it's not a real issue. If there is a noticeable difference in either the given or surname of a person from record to record, you're going to have to bring in even more records. In other words, you may have to bring in the census records and the passenger lists and things that you ordinarily wouldn't have had to have brought in to prove that this is the same person, but because of the name change, you may have to, especially if they didn't do a legal name change. So if they changed it during naturalization, that would be on the naturalization form, but otherwise you may have to, in essence, build a genealogical proof of this is the same person without actually doing the narrative that goes with it.
And regarding naturalization in particular, so if you've never found evidence or a record that your ancestor naturalized, how do you kind of know for sure? And how do you know? Or so if a naturalization record can't be found, how do you know for sure?
Okay, so obviously you have to do your due diligence. So that means, not just doing a search on Ancestry. You're going to have to reach out to National Archive branches. You may even have to go through the genealogical searches that the US CIS offers through their website. And let me tell you, the consulate is just not going to take your word for it. You're going to then have to get a no record found letter from the appropriate either USCIS or the National Archives or both to prove that you have exhausted every possibility and this guy just flat out does not have a naturalization record.
Now, going back to kind of record discrepancies, also if there's record loss, and you showed an example of having to use a passenger list, if the time period, especially in Ireland, if you're talking about people who maybe weren't part of civil registration, but you have a church baptism, can you kind of supply additional documents other than what they're really looking for?
Given the time, as far as Ireland goes, given the date and time that we're talking about that you would probably be doing this, the odds of somebody having been born before 1864 are pretty slim. I won't say it doesn't happen, but that was civil registration. With that said, they have been very explicit in saying you have to have a state record. So if you cannot find one, but you know they were born there, that's going to be one of those situations where you're going to have to reach out to the consulate and say, hey, do I have any options here? As I showed with the Italian one, because we couldn't find it because of the passenger list stating where he was born, that was given. I have seen where they accepted a microfilmed document rather than a certified document from the town because of record destruction, where the family history library had gone in and microfilmed the records of that particular town in Italy, and then subsequent to that there was record destruction. So they were willing to use the copy from the microfilm, but it had to be checked. In other words, it had to be sent to the town hall in Italy, who double checked it with an index that they had to say, yes, according to our index, this matches what you see here. And then they kind of said that that was authentic and that was allowed. But those are, again, those are case-by-case situations, and that's going to be up to the decision of the consulate.
All right, and we have several questions about Canada. Can you say a word about Canadian dual citizenship?
So Canadian dual citizenship is one of those that is extremely limited. It has to be a parent, and that parent cannot have been naturalized before you were born. So which limits the people who can actually apply for it. So if you have a parent who came from Canada, who came down here and for whatever reason chose not to naturalize until after you were born, then you have the ability to get dual citizenship.
All right, and let's see, we're just over time, maybe a few more questions that we can kind of squeeze in here. So Susan asks about the 1912 law that you mentioned. Is that true for everyone, or was that just for Italians that you were referring to? If you could answer that.
That particular law, like the 1948 rule, is an Italian rule. It was a law that said that if the man naturalizes, he was not only denouncing for himself, but also for his descendants. And it was in the Italian country law, the country itself, their laws. So that's an Italian thing.
Another question about, adoption. So if you know that your biological parents were say born in Ireland or Italy, and that you kind of everything works out, can you apply through that if you know the biological line? And if you don't know the biological line, can you apply through your adoptive parents?
Most of the countries that offer dual citizen do it through the the blood link, and so you have to be able to prove your blood descent from the person who is coming from that country. So if you were adopted, but you can get an original birth record that states you are the child of this person who is the child of, the person born in Ireland, then you would be able to do it, but you're also going to have to show you were adopted, name change, all of that's probably going to have to go into it. But if you are looking to try and get it through an adoptive family, that's not going to happen.
All right. I know that, as I mentioned, there were a lot of questions that were asked that we didn't get to. You may consider scheduling a consultation. I know Rhonda does a lot of consultations about this. There is a fee. If you're a member of NEHGS, it's $85 an hour. If you're a non-member of NEHGS, it's $105 an hour. So it's certainly worth becoming a member if this is something that you're interested in and you're not yet a member of NEHGS. Consultations can be done over the phone or in person or online. So even if you're not in the Boston area, you can still work with us. And as I also mentioned, this is also kind of a common request for our research services team, in which they really do a lot of the research for you on your behalf, whereas a consultation with Rhonda or someone else, it's kind of looking over your documents, helping you, kind of giving you the next steps to move forward with that. So as I mentioned, I will include a link to the recording of today's presentation, as well as those contacts for research services and consultations in my follow-up email. So thank you again for joining us today. As you leave the event, you will have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.